Are you a current or future physician assistant wanting to learn more about finances? Then join me on this journey to become a PA the FI way. Hi, my name is Kat, and I'm a practicing certified physician assistant who will be your host. It took me 5 years after I started practicing medicine as a PA to thoroughly dive into my personal finances after I discovered the concept of financial independence. I want to use what I have learned to help you avoid some of the financial mistakes that I have made while sharing some of the financial wins that I have had along the way. Join me as we discuss financial strategies to guide you to becoming a physician assistant on the way to financial independence. Hey friend, welcome back to the PA the FI Way podcast. I'm your host, Kat, and I'm really excited to dive into a really important topic that is so rampant and prevalent in medicine, but it's just not talked about enough, and that's imposter syndrome. If you have ever felt like a fraud, like you actually don't belong in your white coat or maybe don't deserve it, or like you're just waiting around for someone to point out that you're not as competent as they originally thought, then this episode is for you. I'm going to review what imposter syndrome really is, the 5 common types of imposter syndrome that were identified by Dr. Valerie Young, how it shows up in medicine throughout your career, and the sneaky way that imposter syndrome actually ties into your finances. Most importantly, we're going to talk about how to identify it, how to stop it, and how to prevent burnout by doing so. So let's dive in. What is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome is that persistent feeling they are actually not qualified or competent, despite evidence to the contrary. It's when you attribute your success to things like luck, timing, or other people, instead of owning your skills and your effort. Imposter syndrome can tend to lead to perfectionism, overworking, fear of failure, and not asking for help. And in healthcare, it's so common. We work in high-stakes environments, constantly learning throughout our whole career, and surrounded by so many people that are actually brilliant. So it can feel pretty easy to feel like we're falling short. Listen to this imposter syndrome cycle and tell me if you can identify it with it. You come across a new project or a new task. Then anxiety, procrastination, or over-preparation sets in. You complete the project, and for a brief period of time, there is a sense of relief and a sense of accomplishment for doing so. Next, you start to rationalize, thinking, oh, I was just lucky, or someone else would have actually done a better job than I would have. So then you get increased self-doubt, more anxiety, and feeling like a fraud. Then you get another new project or another task, and the cycle starts all over again. Does that sound familiar? Let's talk about Dr. Valerie Young's framework for the 5 types of imposter syndrome. I will also share how each type could manifest working in medicine. So the first type is the perfectionist. You believe you have to do everything perfectly or you failed. You forget that you're actually a human being. You are not a robot. You can make mistakes, but you feel as though you have to be perfect when you're practicing in medicine. For example, this might show up in obsessing over every chart, rereading every note 3 times, proofreading the chart that you just typed up 2 to 3 times before signing off on it, making sure that there are absolutely no typos in there, and never feeling confident unless you're 100% certain of every decision that you're making in medicine. I am not saying that you should be a careless provider by any means, but it's also important not to fall into the perfectionistic trap. The second type of imposter syndrome is the superhuman. If you're a superhuman, you are measuring your worth by how much you can juggle. You say yes to extra shifts. You say yes to precepting students and charting after your hours because you don't want anyone to think that you're lazy or you don't want to feel behind at all, even though you're already exhausted. The third type of imposter syndrome is the natural genius. You believe that things should actually come easily, and if you have to work at something, you feel as though you're not cut out for it. You switch specialties or start a new job and actually feel defeated because you're not instantly excellent at it. The fourth type is the soloist. You think that asking for help proves that you're incompetent. You avoid consulting or calling the attending or your supervising physician or your nurse colleagues because you think, I should be able to handle this by now. I don't need help. The fifth type is the expert. You feel like you never know enough. You hoard certifications. You take all the CME you can find on the topic that you're wanting to learn about. Or you avoid applying for leadership roles because you actually don't feel ready to take that role because you're not quite the expert yet. Do any of those sound familiar to you? I would venture to say that likely many of them do sound familiar. What is important to identify about these 5 types of imposter syndrome are that you can actually have more than one type throughout your career. You can start with one type and then it can morph and change over time to another type. So maybe even though you've been practicing medicine for 15 to 20 years, you still don't feel confident. You still feel like you're suffering from imposter syndrome. Let's talk about how imposter syndrome can show up across your career working in medicine. The first is in training. When you are a student, you could be constantly comparing yourself to your classmates and assume that they all actually know more than you and are doing better than you on their exams, and that can make you feel like an imposter. I'm sure many of us heard this in PA school, but if you think about it, most of us had to be really great students to get into PA school. You were absolutely used to acing all of your exams, and studying probably came naturally to you. If you were like me, PA school was a wake-up call. It was so much harder than undergrad. And I really had to shift the mindset that passing and getting average grades in PA school was totally okay. I did not have to ace every single exam. Otherwise, I would be studying around the clock and hardly getting actually any sleep. Thankfully, I had that shift in my mindset pretty quickly in PA school, but maybe some of you didn't, and maybe you suffered with imposter syndrome throughout PA school. The next step that imposter syndrome absolutely so commonly shows up in is as a new grad. And that's because you are learning your specialty, you are learning how to actually work as a provider, so you start questioning every single decision. And sometimes you can avoid asking questions because you don't want to look incompetent, or on the other extreme, you could be asking questions over and over and over again because you feel like you can't actually make a decision. And then you can start to beat yourself up for not actually being fast enough, seeing the patients as they are coming through the door, or not making decisions fast enough. I remember hearing from newer grad PAs when I was a new grad. They were about 2 to 5 years into their career, and they told me that it takes about 2 years to start to feel comfortable as a new grad. And I would say that that amount of time, that length of time, definitely varies person to person. But it was also a good reminder to have patience with myself and recognize that you're not going to know everything right away as a new grad. And what's most important is that you actually learn what your resources are, whether your resources look like people that you're working with or resources like up to date, or open evidence is a newer one that is really nice, or Stahl's psychopharmacology if you're in psych. And reminding yourself that you went into a career that you are going to be constantly learning throughout decades. Also, I started my career in family medicine, and family medicine is challenging as well because although you're not expected to know every single thing about every single type of diagnosis or topic or area of medicine, you are expected to know a lot about those things, right? You are the jack of all trades and master of none when you're in family med. And at the same time, you're not going to be the specialist across all of these different specialties when you're working in family med, but you still have to know enough to be that first line provider that starts the workup and starts figuring out what's going on and managing lots of different diseases across the board. So family medicine is definitely a challenging specialty where imposter syndrome can set in. All specialties have their different areas where imposter syndrome can show up more than others as well. Another time in your career when imposter syndrome can show up is actually after you've been working for several years and you can still feel like you're maybe pretending working in medicine or feel like you don't know enough still, even though you've been working for several years. Maybe you started precepting and you're working with a student and you feel really weird giving advice because you don't feel like you're smart enough to give them advice yet or smart enough to teach them yet. So imposter syndrome can absolutely manifest when you're precepting. I started precepting very early in my career, And that was partially because the precepting was more of a group type of environment where several of the providers would precept the students. And that was super bizarre and felt like I was such an imposter because I was barely new grad myself. And yet I was serving as a mentor to these PA students. At the same time, though, I'm thankful that I was a bit forced into precepting right away because otherwise I probably would have just never precepted and always kept thinking, oh, I don't think I'd be that great of a teacher, or who am I to precept a PA student? I don't know everything. But you definitely know a lot more than they do. And even just teaching them logistics and workflow and those things that they don't teach you in school, that's super invaluable as well. Another area in your career where imposter syndrome can show up is when you are changing specialties. It was so funny. When I worked in family medicine, I thoroughly thought I saw so much psych in family medicine, right? And family medicine providers out there, you know that that's absolutely true. You do see a lot of psychiatry. You see tons of anxiety symptoms, depression symptoms, ADHD symptoms, and you are managing a lot of psych in family med. So I naturally thought that changing from family medicine to psychiatry would be relatively straightforward. However, it's so important to recognize that most patients that are seeing a psychiatry provider, they often can be more challenging to treat. Maybe they're on several medications. Maybe their symptoms are much more severe. So it was definitely challenging and made me realize, okay, even though I saw a lot of quote unquote psychiatry in family med, it definitely was not the deeper, more challenging type of psychiatry that you see as a psychiatry specialist. Sure, my family medicine skills highly helped with building up on my psych skills and definitely taught me to have a broader range of a differential when I am seeing people for different symptoms. But I will say that I definitely had some imposter syndrome managing very challenging to treat psychosis or mania right when I transferred specialties. Thankfully, I have had amazing support with supervising physicians and colleagues, and it really helped with that transition. But maybe you've experienced imposter syndrome when you've changed specialties over your career. Next, I want to tie this information about imposter syndrome back to your finances. This is what we don't talk about enough. Imposter syndrome doesn't just cause you to burn out when you are feeling like you are needing to be a perfectionist and overachieving and saying yes to everything, or having that feeling of that you're not good enough constantly. Imposter syndrome also impacts your financial well-being. And here's how it does it. The first way is that you will undervalue yourself. If you have imposter syndrome, you might not negotiate your salary or ask for a raise because you're afraid that someone will say that, oh, you're actually not worth that much more. And that can be hurtful. If you have imposter syndrome, you can overwork to prove your worth. So you start taking on those extra shifts, not because you actually want to, but because you feel like you have to. And sure, you'd be making more money if you are doing that as long as you're not in a salary role. But what's the cost? Remember, time is your most precious asset. Another way that imposter syndrome affects your financial well-being is that you might start spending your money trying to feel more legit. For example, you might feel like you need to buy those fancy scrubs to look and feel smarter, or the new car to fit in, or even go on expensive vacation. Not because you actually want those things, but because you feel like that you need to get them to actually feel like you've made it as a provider. Or maybe you avoid spending money altogether. So you think that you're not really good with money or good with investing. So you don't take the time to learn this information and you tell yourself, I'll figure it out later and kick the can down the road. Finally, you might sabotage your wealth. Even if you feel like you're earning a decent income, you might start feeling guilty about rest or even guilty about success in building your wealth. And you might think, who am I to have the freedom, whether that's time freedom, financial freedom, or who am I to have this type of abundance in my life? But the truth is that financial wellness and self-worth and imposter syndrome are all connected. If you don't believe that you're worthy, you will find ways to overwork and under-earn even when you don't have to. So now that we've learned how to spot imposter syndrome and how it ties into your finances, let's talk about how to combat imposter syndrome. The first way is to name it. Call it out for what it is. Say, this is imposter syndrome, not actually facts. To help with that, the next step is to keep a journal, and you can call the journal different things. You could call it your wins and words journal. You can call it your brag flags journal. You can call it your accomplishments journal. Any of those different names for it that resonate for you, you can go ahead and call it that. But in this journal, you track your progress. Think about how you were as a new grad compared to how you are today, or think about how you were as a PA student compared to how you are today. You also track your compliments that you get from others when they tell you that you're doing a great job, or when your patients compliment you and say, thank you so much. You really took the time to listen to me today. You can also track moments of bravery. When did you have to be courageous and take a step of faith? You can track different wins throughout the day or throughout the week. You can track moments that felt scary and write down how you actually handled those moments. This is what you go ahead and review and look back on and reflect on when you are feeling imposter syndrome set in again. The next step is to talk it out. You can talk to your colleagues, you can talk to your supervising physician, ask them about their experience with imposter syndrome. You could even talk to a therapist if you'd like mental health support. You can find online communities to talk about it as well. Again, you very likely will find that you are not suffering alone, and so many people have had similar symptoms throughout their career. The next step is to remind yourself and accept the fact that confidence comes after action, not before. You are not going to feel confident doing something for the absolute first time, but it's in the doing, in the practice, in the action that creates the confidence. The next step is to challenge your financial beliefs. If you feel like you have imposter syndrome, remind yourself that you are allowed to be well compensated for your knowledge, for your care for your patients. You are allowed to be rested, and you are allowed to build your wealth over time. As I wrap up, this is your reminder that imposter syndrome is actually lying to you. It wants you to shrink, it wants you to overcompensate, it wants you to burn out, wants you to feel like you don't belong. But you don't have to believe those thoughts. You are capable, you are learning, and you belong. I invite you to head to the show notes and download the Imposter Syndrome Guide that will have information and tools in there to help you fight back against imposter syndrome. If this information resonated with you, think about a friend or a colleague that you could share this episode with that would find it helpful as well. And I would love to hear from you. Head over to Instagram or Facebook and comment what your experience has been with imposter syndrome, what has helped you over time, or which of these tools was helpful to hear. I'm so thankful for each of you for taking a listen today, and I'll see you back here soon. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you decide to continue to join me along this journey of becoming a PA the FI way. Please take a moment to press the subscribe button on the platform that you are listening to this on, but more importantly, consider sharing with another current or future PA that could benefit from the information that we reviewed in this episode. Take care and have a great rest of your day. Until next time.